Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card. Today I'm using my easy watercolor technique. I've used it before, and I'm using these Artful Flowers stamps by Simon Says Stamp, some Distress ink, pumice stone, and 3 markers. One is Salty Ocean, one is Scattered Straw, and the other is Peeled Paint. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is take a Post-it. I've been using a lot of Post-its lately. I just find that they're very convenient. So I'm going to take my pumice stone and all 3 flowers I'm going to be using, and I'm going to make masks right now because I know I'm going to be using them a lot. So I'm going to stamp them all on the sticky part of the Post-it and cut them all out. And you don't have to be exact about cutting them out. It just needs to be approximate. So now I'm going to go ahead and stamp all of these flowers, and I'm going to start with my biggest one on one side, and I'm using Strathmore watercolor paper, by the way, and then I'll take one of the smaller ones and put it on the other side, and then I'm going to put my masks down. So I'll put my mask on this one, and I'll put my mask on the other one. I have to figure out which mask belongs where, and then I'll take my third flower and I'll stamp it above these, which will actually look like it's behind it because it's not going to stamp on top of those the images I already stamped. And then I'll stamp this flower again underneath it. And I'm just really randomly doing this. I don't really have a pattern. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the mask there and do some more flowers behind these. So I'm going to ink up my big one. I'll put one down here on the lower right. And then one more, I think, no, actually 2 more. I'm going to pull one of my smaller ones and put it on the left here. And then I pulled my mask off the upper right because I can use that again to stamp behind this flower that I just stamped. So I pull that off, put that down, and then stamp one more with the pumice stone. And this ink is a very, very light color, so it won't stand out. I really didn't want to stamp it in black because then you really see an outline. I just want it to be very subtle. Now the next step for this watercolor is to take your distress markers and actually color direct to the paper. So I want my colors, or my flowers, to be blue and yellow, and I want them to be blue on the inside, yellow on the outside. So I'm going to take my marker and start at the center of the flower, and each petal I'm going to color it outward. Then I'll take Scattered Straw and start on the outside of the petal. Make sure I go all the way to the edge of each petal and work my way in, but I'm going to leave a gap between the blue and the yellow. And I found that this was the best way to get a nice graduated color between the 2 colors. If you get them too close together, then the colors start blending a little bit too much, and I wanted them to definitely be 2 distinct colors. So I'm going to do this on all the flowers, and then I'll take my paintbrush, dip it in some water, and what you want to do is just tap it. So I'm just tapping it on my yellow, and you want to put quite a bit of water, and you want to make sure that you start at the very, very edge. You don't want to start in the middle of the flower. You want to start at the very edge where the yellow is. You'll work your way all the way to the center and then stop. So you're never going to go from blue to yellow. It's always going to be yellow to blue. If you need to put more water into the yellow, then clean your brush off first before you do that. Otherwise, you'll just get a bunch of green. So as you can see, I've got a lot of water on this brush. And so some of them I put a lot of water, some of them I put not that much water. But that gap in between the 2 colors kind of keeps them a little bit more separated. Now, the more water you have, the more the 2 colors will be blended. So as you can see, also I'm alternating because I don't want to have any 2 wet petals done at the same time because then they'll merge into each other and then you'll get a big mess. So I'm going to alternate from one petal. I'll skip one, do the next one, skip one, do the next one. And I'm going to work my way all the way around here. Now with the more practice I got coloring these flowers, I kind of figured out the best way to do it. So I'm going to start here. I slowed it down for this part. And I'm going to color the yellow with not that much water. So I want to definitely get the cardstock wet, but I don't want to have the water pooling up. And so I pause for just a second after I get my yellow soaked, and then I move in with more water on the blue. So the blue, I definitely do want to get a lot of water so that it spreads out, but if my yellow is not that wet, it's not going to seep all the way to the edge of the yellow. And you'll see that after I'm done here, you'll get a nice dark edge around the blue because the water pushed the color to the edge and made a water stain. So it's really pretty. All right, this stem comes with the set. And what I did was I wanted all the flowers to kind of be bunched up at the bottom. So I took my stamp and I kind of curved it however I needed it to be curved. and then I stamped it with my pumice stone for each flower. And I don't think I have as many stems as I have flowers because they kind of all run together at the bottom. And I'm going to keep moving this around and curving it until I get them all so that they're all kind of coming together at the very bottom. And on some of these I had to use my mask, so I put the mask back on there so I didn't cover or ink over any of the flowers. So I'm going to go ahead and do all those, and then I'll take my peeled paint marker and I'm going to draw a line just on the left hand side of all these stems. And it doesn't have to be exact, and mine were kind of messy, especially as I went back as I got to the bottom, because I couldn't really tell what stem was what, so I just kind of drew a line at the bottom. And then I took a thinner paintbrush and I just put some water and just colored it in as if there was no marker there. So it really was kind of a messy, not really exact process here. I'm just coloring each stem, and then the peeled paint will kind of move into the whole stem. So it'll keep it a little bit darker on the left hand side, but it'll blend out so that you have the whole stem covered in some color. And then there are just a couple of stems at the top that I needed to fill in, and I really didn't bother with my stamp. I just colored with my peeled paint marker a little bit and then added just a tiny bit of water, just so they look the same, but they don't have an outline. I don't think anybody's going to notice. Alright, now what I'm going to do is draw the veins of each of the petals, and I'm going to start at the base, and this is my Salty Ocean marker, and I'm using the fine tip, and I'm going to flick up my marker. That's why I'm turning my paper, because it's easier if you flick it up. So I'm going to kind of go up and curve it around a little bit and have some shorter lines on the sides. So as you can see, you want to be really light-handed. And so I wanted some longer ones on this particular petal, but you can see I did one that was way too long and went all the way over the edge. But the beauty of the watercolors, I just took my wet brush just with plain water, and I brushed some water on there, and then I took a tissue, make sure it's clean, and when I blotted it, my Salty Ocean pen mark was completely gone. So that's what I love about watercolors. You can always fix it. You can always remove it by adding water and then pulling it out with a paper towel or a tissue or whatever. So I'm going to draw all these stems on every single flower starting at the base, and notice that my longer ones are toward the center and then my shorter ones are on the sides. Now this stamp comes with a set, and I'm not really trying to line up the dots at all. I'm just kind of randomly stamping the dots in there wherever there are dots. And again, I'll pull my mask out to make sure that I don't cover any flowers I don't need to. This is the Sketchy Banner Greeting set by Simon Says Stamp, and I find that this is one of the most useful stamp sets I own. And so I'm going to take the Feel Better Soon one. I'll stamp it in some Versamark ink on some black cardstock, sprinkle it with some white embossing powder, and then I'll heat it to set it. Now I love this set because it has so many different sentiments, and they're not weird. They're all just basic. So if you want to do a just basic sentiment, this is a great set to have. So I decided to be a renegade here, and I'm just doing this freehand, and I'm not planning anything, and I'm not measuring anything, and everybody knows how much of a perfectionist I am. And so this is what happens when I do this. This is a terrible banner. It's really short on one side and long on the other side. So I decided to re-stamp the whole thing, re-emboss, and now I'm going to measure it out. So what I've done is I've measured 3/8 of an inch from the F and 3/8 of an inch from the exclamation point, which, by the way, my stamp doesn't have a dot. I need to fill that in by hand. And then I'll cut those so that I have my marks 3/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to measure 1/8 in, and I'll center it. So 1/8. So now I've got kind of 1/3, if you want to think of it as percentages, so that, because sometimes you want to be bigger because your letters are bigger, but essentially 1/3 of the way in, and then I'm going to cut the center to that mark, and then I'll cut it from the corner to that mark, and then I'll cut it from the other corner to that mark. And that way everything's going to be the same. So I'll flip it over and go through that same exact process. I'm speed it up here, and then you'll see that everything looks perfect. So this was much better. Alright, finally I'm going to adhere everything together. I've got my ATG gun, my watercolor panel, and I'm going to use my little fingertip trick, which I used last video, just to kind of hold it down and get it even at the bottom. And then I'll adhere that to my card base. And there's a little extra at the top, so I'm just going to take my scissors and trim it off. And then I'm going to pop my sentiment up with some Stampin' Up! Dimensionals, just some foam adhesive, and center it right there on the stems. And that's the card for today. It's really super simple watercolor, and I love the effect. I love how the water kind of pools at the edges to make it a little bit darker. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll have a link to another card that I use this technique on. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.